agenda, they're right there on that email.
What's the guy name that's the attorney? That attorney sitting down there, what is his name? Huh? Sanitation? Oh, he's the one that wrote that letter, Yeah, yeah. We have to do a motion on that.
Okay. Okay. All right.
Hmm. Yeah. He said he's right. Well, we're gonna do both sets individually. We're gonna do the 18th first and then a motion tonight.
Yes. Okay. Yes. Yes.
Wonder where the garland them go. It's after 6. It's 6 o'clock. Hmm. Good evening. It is 6:02 p.m. and I call this meeting of the Medical Marijuana Commission to order. Roll call, Mr. Secretary.
Ford Jr. is absent. Wilson,
Present.
Maley,
Present.
Horath, present.
Next item on the agenda is can I get an authorization to excuse Commissioner Ford?
Motion to excuse.
I second it.
It's been moved and properly second that Commissioner Ford be excused. Next item on the agenda.
But we're gonna
Oh,
call
I'm
the roll.
sorry. You've heard the motion.
Okay.
Roll call.
Wilson,
Yes.
Maley,
Yes.
Horath.
Yes.
Are there any amendments to the agenda?
None.
Next item on the agenda is a motion to approve the agenda as printed. Can I get a motion to approve?
Motion to approve.
I second the motion.
It's been moved and properly second that the agenda be approved as printed. Roll call.
Maley,
Yes, to approve the meeting minutes. Or the
No, the
agenda.
agenda.
Agenda, excuse me.
Horath,
Yes.
Ford.
Four.
I'm sorry, Wilson.
Yes. Motion to approve the agenda. Next item on the agenda is the minutes approval from May 18th, 2022. Can I get a motion to approve the minutes from May
Mo-
the 18th?
Approval of the motion.
Motion to approve
Motion to approve, yeah.
the meeting of May 18th, 2022 minutes.
Second.
It's been moved and properly second. Could I get a roll call to approve the minutes?
Horath,
Yes.
Wilson,
Yes.
Maley.
Yes.
Okay.
Need a motion to approve the minutes from May the 19th, 2022.
Motion to approve the minutes of May 19th, 2022.
I second it.
It's been moved and properly second that the minutes from May 19th be approved. Roll call.
Wilson,
Yes.
Maley,
Minutes.
Yes.
Horath.
Yes.
Next item on the agenda is the non-overlay provisioning center appeal hearings. First, we'll do a discussion on common citizens appeal. Are there any discussions from the commissions on common citizens appeal?
Yes, I have some. I have read the appeal. The appeal is, or the appellant is Common Citizen, and they are appealing facility floor plan section with a score of 8 of 10, and also facility sanitation with a score of 1 of 2. For the floor plan, the scoring criteria lists the following line items for consideration in scoring this section. A facility floor plan, a description of the renovation needed to meet the floor plan, time needed to complete renovations and setup, a scale diagram illustrating the property where the facility is to be operated, including all available parking spaces, and specifying which parking spaces are handicapped accessible, and that document needs to be signed and sealed by a licensed professional surveyor. The next item is any proposed text or graphics to be posted on the building exterior. The next item would be the size and nature of said exterior signs or graphics. And then the next item under that would be the number of external graphics or signs, and then followed by verification and compliance with state and local building codes for safety and things like that. as well as eventually a certificate of occupancy. Now, took me a while to sort through this. In the application for the non-overlay 108, I was looking first of all for a tab, section 8.c.18 through 21, that would lead me to the facility planning area. I didn't find one. I did find a 22-page, 22 by 36-inch drawing package for the proposed building on Woodward Avenue. And while very complete and orderly, the drawing package may infer some sense of renovations needed, but they really do not offer any comprehensible timeline for it. And the appellant is arguing that that should be clear from those drawings what the renovations would be, and then also that they mention that in their business plan under section 8C or 8.c.6, there was a line that included the statement that construction period would take no longer than 6 months after application is granted. And there was a note that I saw later there in that same business plan that mentioned referring to renderings attached in Appendix A. The timelines were completely really, that's a simple thing to do on the scoring criteria, to list those two items, what we were proposing and how long we thought it would take, and they just simply weren't there, or were vague at best. For the facility sanitation score of 1 of 2, the appellant is arguing that sanitation service provider contracts are not required by ordinance, despite the fact that the scoring criteria clearly lists those items. Following the certificate of occupancy in this planning and building section, the next item is a facility sanitation plan. Right under that is a plan for ensuring proper treatment and security of waste. And then the last item is a contracts with service providers for waste disposal and treatment. While I understand that you can't generate a contract for a business that's not operating yet, I think perhaps had someone considered including a letter of intent from some licensed waste management company stating that they had agreed to provide the service once the appellant was successful in opening their business. That may have gone a long way towards making a difference. But in general, I agree with the scoring of 1 of 2 in this section. Overall, that was my conclusion on this, and I don't find the arguments to be arbitrary or capricious.
That good for you? Okay. All right.
Any other discussion?
Yeah, I'd just like to point out too, I had seen a lot of what Commissioner Maley talked about too. There were a few things that were in the scoring criteria guide. One under family, the facility planning, sorry. The description of renovations is on the scoring criteria guide on page 6 of line 40. So it is there. And on that, I also agree that the scoring of 4 out of 8 for that is not arbitrary and capricious. And that's all. That's what I have to add to Commissioner Maley. Thank you.
In my observations, I concur with what the other 2 commissioners have already stated. I also noted that in the instruction packages for sections 8C 21 and 27, they are spelled out on pages 13 of 21 in the instruction packages, and also in the ordinance 2357B, it's spelled out on page 57. So I concur with what the other 2 commissioners have already said without going into any further details. Happen to notice on August the 24th, Common Citizens did receive a score of 125 out of 130. After the hearing officer's review, The hearing officer did confirm the score of 125 out of 130. He did uphold that there were no changes made to it, so I concur with what the other two commissions have already stated. With that, I would like to read the resolution that was signed. Resolution for Common Citizens Appeal to the Medical Marijuana Commissions. Whereas in 2018, voters approved the City of Pontiac Marijuana Facility Ordinance, which is Ordinance 2357B, and whereas Ordinance 2357B gives the city the responsibility to score and rank applications by the provisioning center using a 130-point scoring system and awarding permits to the 20 highest scoring applicants. And whereas the City of Pontiac adopted Ordinance 2363, an ordinance to include medical marijuana facilities used in designated overlaying districts. And whereas Ordinance 2363, Section 2.546, Medical Marijuana Provisioning Center, Section F, licensing states that no more than 5 provisioning centers shall be established in each of the medical marijuana overlaying districts, including Cesar Chavez, Walton Boulevard, and C2 Downtown Overlay District. And whereas Ordinance 2363, no more than 5 provisioning centers shall be established in the C1, C3, and C4 zone properties combined outside of the medical marijuana overlaying district. And whereas the city clerk adopted provisioning centers application by overlaying districts and the non-overlay for a 21-day period, January 6th through the 27th, 2020. And whereas the city clerk ranked and scored provisioning centers by district using a 130-point scoring system, and whereas the city clerk informed MPX-RIX, known as Common Citizens, that the application for a provisioning center in the non-overlay had received a score of 125 of 130 and a ranking of 5 of 48 on August the 24th, 2021. Whereas Common Citizens appealed the score and ranking to the city clerk since its application was tied for fifth place with another application in the non-overlay. The city clerk appointed Growell Law PLLC to serve as the hearing officer. The hearing officer conducted a hearing on October the 29th, 2021. The hearing officer issued a recommendation to the city clerk to affirm its scoring. The city clerk adopted the hearing officer's recommendation. Based on the hearing officer's recommendation and other appeals in the non-overlay, Common Citizens' ranking changed from 5 to 6. The city clerk informed Common Citizens of their ranking change, and they were no longer ranked in the top 5. Therefore, Common Citizens' application was denied. And whereas Ordinance 2357B allows an applicant to further appeal to the Medical Marijuana Commission, and whereas Common Citizen submitted an appeal to the Medical Marijuana Commission on December the 29th, 2021, and whereas the city attorney issued a recommendation to the Medical Marijuana Commission to deny Common Citizens' appeal, and whereas the Medical Marijuana Commission reviewed Common Citizens' appeal and the city attorney's recommendation. Now, therefore, be it resolved, the Medical Marijuana Commission finds no basis to overturn the city clerk's decision to deny common citizens' application for a provisioning center in the non-overlay. You've heard the reading of the resolution. Can I get a motion to act on the resolution?
Motion to act on the resolution?
I second it.
It has been moved and second for a motion to act on the resolution. Roll call.
Wilson,
Yes.
Maley,
Yes.
Craft.
Yes.
Next item on the agenda.
Yes. Yeah. 3 yeas. No nays.
The next item on the agenda is item number 5, discussion on JARS LLC appeals. Are there any discussion on JARS LLC appeal? Any discussions?
I can start. So, again, I don't know if it's JARS or JARS, but JARS LLC is appealing their score in community development with 8 of 10, a facility planning score of 4 of 8, a sanitation score of 1 of 2, a neighborhood land use 5 of 10, and a community impact also under land use of 5 of 10. Starting with the facility planning, specifically the appellant is appealing the requirement to include a description of the renovations and timeline required. Again, these items were clearly listed in the scoring criteria, and I disagree that it's not. They are required. It was there. Many keen-eyed applicants did pick up on the various information and the other documents provided, and were able to provide those items. So I do find that that renders that section somewhat deficient in the scoring. For facility sanitation, the appellant argues that there was no need to have a contract for waste provider. But again, the scoring criteria lists that such would be considered and judged accordingly. That is, again, going back to the facility sanitation plan requirement on the scoring and criteria list, a plan for ensuring proper treatment and security of waste, and contracts with service providers for waste disposal and treatment. Again, a letter that, even a letter of intent from a sanitation provider would have gone a long way to that area. I'll let others comment on the remaining if they choose to.
Okay, I can just bump up with that. Commissioner Maley read that also, that I looked at that sort of stuff also, but I made notes here just in case there's some are unclear on this. It's in the scoring scoring criteria guide. It's this page 6, where under section 8C21, line 50, contracts with service providers for waste disposal and treatment are required in the criteria. Just add that. Anything else, Mr. Wilson?
Yes, I also noted during the same comments that I had under the others, I did notice that under community development, out of the 8 out of 10 points, the meetings that was found on pages 12 of 21 under the application instructions, it clearly spelled out what the criteria was for community development. You can also see page 2 of 9 of the scoring criteria guide that spells out what was to have been submitted under community development. Also notice that under facility planning, there and again, under the instructions that was spelled out on page 14 of 21 in the application process, and on page 12 and 13 of 21, that too was spelled out in the instruction process for facility planning. Under community impact, I do notice that under safety, they did add an additional 4 points to, they did add an additional 4 points under that. Under facility planning, you can also see the same criteria that are noted on page 13 of page 21 for facility planning. I note that a +3 points was added to facility planning. It did, the hearing officer did add a +4 points to neighborhood land use and 4 points to community impact. When the applicant was first reviewed, the scoring out of the scoring criteria, they did receive a total of 100 points out of a total of 130. The city clerk did take in consideration the hearing officer's recommendation, and he bumped that score up to 111 out of 130 points. And in reading over that and what the city clerk did with the recommendation, he did add the additional points and took into consideration the hearing officer's recommendation. With that being said, I pretty much agree with what the other two commissioners have already said. I would like to read the resolution that's given for Gyres LLC appeal. Under the resolution for Gyres LLC appeals, whereas in 2018, voters approved the City of Pontiac Medical Marijuana Facility Ordinance 2357B, and whereas Ordinance 2357B gives the city clerk the responsibility to score and rank application provisioning center using a 130-point scoring system and awarding permits to the 20 highest scoring applicants. And whereas the City of Pontiac adopted Ordinance 2363 and ordinance to include medical marijuana facility use in designated overlay districts. And whereas Ordinance 2363, Section 2.546, Medical Marijuana Provisioning Center, Section F, licensing states that no more than 5 provisioning centers shall be established in each of the medical marijuana overlay districts, including Cesar Chavez, Walton Boulevard, and C2 Downtown Overlay District. And whereas Ordinance 2363, no more than 5 provisioning centers shall be established in the C1, C3, and C4 zone properties combined outside of the medical marijuana overlay district. And whereas the city clerk accepted provisioning center applications by overlay districts and the non-overlay for a 21-day period, January the 6th through the 27th, 2020. And whereas the city clerk ranked and scored provisioning centers by district using a 130-point scoring system. And whereas the city clerk informed Gyres Holding LLC that their application for a provisioning center in the non-overlay had received a score of 100 of 130 and ranking 33 out of 48 on August the 20th, 2021. Whereas Gyres Holding LLC appealed the scoring and ranking to the city clerk since its application was denied because it was not ranked in the top 5 for the non-overlay. The city clerk appointed Grawell's Law PLC to serve as the hearing officer. The hearing officer conducted a hearing on October the 29th, 2021. The hearing officer issued a recommendation to the city clerk. The city clerk adopted the hearing officer's recommendation. Based on the hearing officer's recommendation and other appeals and the non-overlay, Giles Holding LLC ranking changed from 33 to 19 and remained not ranked in the top 5. Therefore, the city clerk affirmed his decision to deny Giles Holding LLC application. And whereas Ordinance 2357B allows an applicant to further appeal to the Medical Marijuana Commission. Whereas Giles Holding LLC submitted an appeal to the Medical Marijuana Commission on December the 29th, 2021. And whereas the city attorney issued a recommendation to the Medical Marijuana Commission to deny Giles Holding LLC appeal. And whereas the Medical Marijuana Commission reviewed Giles Holdings LLC appeal and the city's attorney's recommendation. Now, therefore, be it resolved, the Medical Marijuana Commission find no basis to overturn the clerk's decision to deny Giles Holding LLC application for a provisioning center in the non-overlay. Item number 7. Oh, I'm sorry. Can I get a motion to act on the resolution for Giles LLC's appeal?
Motion to take action.
I second the motion to deny the appeal.
You've heard the motion. Can I get a roll call?
Maley,
Yes, to deny.
Craft,
Yes.
Wilson.
Yes.
3 yeas, no nays.
The resolution as read is approved. The next item on the agenda is a discussion on joyology appeal. Discussion on joyology appeal. Is there any discussion on joyology appeal?
Yeah, I can start on a couple here. One thing I do, just a little personal note, I love that name, Joyology. I wish I would have thought of it, but anyway. We have some things that do pop up now and then, and all I want to just reiterate is that in all the packaging, all the application forms, all the scoring criteria guide, there was some that was just simply overlooked, and this is true of a few of them out there. Like one under the facility planning, I found that deficient signage. For example, the hearing officer says some criteria not met about signs. Submitted was a graphic showing their logo and color, but no reference to where it would be placed nor dimensions of it. It's clearly spelled out, so score to me, they got a score of 4 out of 8, not arbitrary or capricious, and I agree to that. Resident safety, one contention that the appellant returned their appeal was that there's zero evidence that the proposed business would decrease resident safety. It defies logic and common sense to withhold 7 out of 8 points to an applicant who proposed community improvement plans and security plan that meets MRA minimums. Hearing officer says it's not for the score. It's not for the score to confirm the responsibility, that it's not the score's responsibility, sorry. Sometimes I have a hard time reading my own notes. To determine that the business would decrease the resident's safety. It's a responsibility of the appellant to describe, quote, the applicant's plan for mitigating detriments, which they didn't do. So that score stays at 5 out of 10 on that. There were a few others that the others can go to, but they did get a little bit of a bump up. So some of their appeal worked, and I'll pass on to, because it ended up being going from 113 to 116. But anyway, I'll let some of my colleagues here pitch in on something that they would like to talk about. I yield the floor.
Okay, I'll take it. So, well, I agree with Commissioner Porath as far as the signage for the appellant argues that they did have a rendering of the building with the proposed sign in proportion to it. So, yes, it was plain to me that there was a sign, probably. But again, it's a simple thing to check the box and follow the scoring criteria, and just, one sign. It'll be this big. And that would have checked those other 2 boxes, made that a lot easier to score. The appellant's also appealing a sanitation score of 1 of 2, and the appellant argues they provided a satisfactory information to receive the full 2 points for the sanitation plan, but this commissioner disagrees, since the appellant's application information for this Section 8C21 contains 2 sentences referenced in business plan. See page 16 to 18 in the business plan. So, referring to that section, I go to the appellant's application and read through the business plan, and I read through it, and it becomes apparent that the section provides details with how employees will be trained and monitored to maintain sanitary conditions in and around the facility, as well as care for the product, and also how pest control in and around the facility will be handled, as well as helping to ensure that the pest control devices would not impact, contaminate personnel or the product. Unfortunately, I really couldn't find any mention of marijuana disposal at all. The application instructions, page 13 of 21, section 8C21, clearly list the applicant must submit a facility sanitation plan that describes how waste will be stored and disposed of, and how marijuana will be rendered unusable upon disposal at the proposed medical marijuana facility. I could find no information about this. So I would agree with the 1 of 2 in that the category was not met. There's also listings in the scoring criteria that, again, number 1, facility sanitation plan. Number 2, plan for ensuring proper treatment and security of the waste. And number 3, contracts with service providers for waste disposal and treatment. 2 of these items seem to be missing. The appellant also appealed the land use, resident safety. This commissioner really has I have no comment on that section. I couldn't decide one way or another, frankly.
Thank you. To further add to what has already been said, I would take a couple of items and review that. Geology argues that the examiner did not score correctly in 7 of the areas. Under security, I did look at, after reviewing Exhibit A for employees' training techniques, and read all the way through Exhibit C, which included security cameras and restricted area access. I noticed that the hearing officer took all of those same documents into consideration, and in taking those documents into consideration, he did award the additional points, which gave the maximum number of points in the security area. I also noticed that in facility planning, basically the same comments that the other commissioners have already noticed, and most applicants that presented items under facility planning, the instructions are clearly spelled out on pages 13 of 21 and also on pages 14 of 31 in the instructions in the application permit. Also read page 7, item 8C20, that's spelled out in the documents that we have, which is the 2357B. It clearly spells out the instructions for facility planning. I do agree with the hearing officer that that should remain the same. On the patient's education, the applicant was awarded an additional 2 points. So overall, on August the 20th, the application started out with 113 of 130 points. After awarding an additional 3 points overall to this applicant, the city clerk did take in consideration the hearing officer's recommendation, did bump the score up from 113 out of 130. It bumped it up to a total of 116 out of 130 points. And what I've read and the other two commissioners have already noticed, I firmly agree with what the hearing officer's recommendation was to the city clerk. And with that being said, I would like to read the resolution that we have from the, I would like to read the resolution. Resolution on 1600 Broadway. I'm sorry, the resolution for Joyology, appeal to the Marijuana Commission. Whereas in 2018, voters approved the City of Pontiac's Marijuana Facility Ordinance, which is 2357B, and whereas Ordinance 2357B gave the city clerk the responsibility to score and rank applicants for provisioning centers using a 130-point scoring system and awarding permits to 20 highest scoring applicants. And whereas the City of Pontiac adopted Ordinance 2363 and ordinance to include medical marijuana facility using designated overlay district. And whereas Ordinance 2363, Section 254, Ordinance 2.546, Medical Marijuana Provisioning Center, Section F, licensing state that no more than 5 provisioning centers shall be established in each of the medical marijuana overlay districts, including Cesar Chavez, Walton Boulevard, and C2 Downtown Overlay District. And whereas Ordinance 2363, no more than 5 provisioning centers shall be established in the C1, C3, and C4 zone properties combined outside of the medical marijuana overlay district. And whereas the city clerk accepted provision centers application by overlay district and the non-overlay for a 21-day period of January 6th through the 27th, 2020. And whereas the city clerk ranked and scored provisioning centers by districts using a 130-point scoring system. And whereas the city clerk informed 1600 Broadway LLC, Joyology, that their application for a provisioning center in the non-overlay had received a score of 113 of 130 and a ranking of 14 of 48 on August the 20th, 2021. Whereas 1600 Broadway LLC, Joyology appealed the score and ranking to the city clerk since its application was denied because it was not ranked in the top 5 for the non-overlay. The city clerk appointed Grawell Law PLLC to serve as the hearing officer. The hearing officer conducted a hearing on October the 28th, 2021. The hearing officer issued a recommendation to the city clerk. The city clerk adopted the hearing officer's recommendation. Based on the hearing officer's recommendation and other appeals in the non-overlay 1600 Broadway LLC, known as Joyology, ranking remained the same and not ranked in the top 5. Therefore, the city clerk affirmed his decision to deny 1600 Broadway Joyology's application. And whereas Ordinance 2357B allows an applicant to further appeal to the Medical Marijuana Commission. And whereas 1600 Broadway LLC, known as Joyology, submitted an appeal to the Medical Marijuana Commission on December the 29th, 2021. And whereas the city attorney issued a recommendation to the Medical Marijuana Commission to deny 1600 Broadway LLC, dubbed Joyology's appeal. And whereas the Medical Marijuana Commission reviewed 1600 Broadway LLC, known as Joyology's appeal, and the city's attorney's recommendation. The floor is open for a motion to take action on the resolution for
Motion.
Joyology.
Motion to take action.
Seconded.
It's been moved and properly second for motion to take action on the resolution. Roll call.
Paraff,
Yes.
Wilson,
Yes.
Maley.
Yes.
3 yeas, no nays.
The resolution for Joyology's appeal has been adopted. Item number 9 on the agenda. Baldwin Investment Group LLC appeal. Item number 9, which is Baldwin Investment Group LLC appeal. Any discussion on Baldwin?
All right, I can start. Baldwin Investment Group for the non-overlay 137 at 125 Baldwin Avenue is appealing the planning section under facility with a score of 4 of 8. Patient education, patient and community programs, a score of 0.5 of 2.5. Land use, neighborhood land use, a score of 5 of 10. And land use, community impact, score of 5 of 10. Before we begin, it's come to the Commission's attention that Baldwin Investment Group's application for the non-overlay 137 score needs to be lowered by 1 point. It was under the background and information subcategory relating to proof of premises liability and casualty insurance. The hearing officer improperly increased this score by 1 during the initial appeal, with the understanding that the letter of intent that was in the possession of Baldwin covered both general and bodily liability, when in fact it did not. The letter of intent only addressed general liability, and so that score that category is deficient and not complete. So the score is reduced by 1. For facility planning, there was some trouble trying to find information in the appellant's application with respect to, description of renovation and time to complete them. The appellant argues that, again, this was not necessary and/or was covered in their business plan. However, the business plan does not address Section 8C18, where the planning for facility section is. And, it's hard to grade things when you cannot find them. So the application process and instructions list clearly that all attachments need to be clearly labeled with applicable ordinance sections. Further, both scoring criteria and application checklist reference these same renovation, description, and timeline checklists as per ordinance section 8C18. And it seems to me that this application was graded according to what information could be found by the reviewer, and I agree that that category was somewhat deficient. That's all I have on this.
I'd just like to point out, in addition to Commissioner Maley here, I found many of the things he found under land use. There was also an incomplete incident report plan. The hearing officer says, quote, "The plan is in effect to inform a manager and call the police." This is under the resident safety subcategory, where it specifically states in the scoring criteria guide, page 8, plan for security and facility, including surveillance. Item 4 under 9F2 says agreements with law enforcement or private security company to ensure area safety. So it's a little, I don't know, the plan is to in fact inform a manager and call the police. That definitely does not fit that criteria at all. So I stick with the scoring on that one. And I'll let Commissioner Wilson say something if he would like.
There and again, I happen to notice in the majority of the, Then again, I happen to notice under facility planning, after reviewing of section 8C18, the instructions that are spelled out on, there and again, on page 14 of 31, and the info that was listed, there was some information for construction data that was shown under section 8C10B, and that was spelled out and should have been shown on the 8C18. The pages did clearly spell out, as I've said many times before, in the facility planning. If the instructions had been followed and all of the sections labeled as it should have been, it would have had the right information under the various sections that it should have been under there. I also noted that some items was mislabeled in the packet that was spelled out when I went through the instructions guideline and the application instructions, and when I also went through the website, the same instructions that appeared on the document 2357B, and also on the application process instructions, and on the instructions for filling out the permit, they basically ran concurrent to each other, and it was clearly spelled out in there. And in looking at the majority of the applicants that did turn in applications, facility planning did seem to be the hardest struggling one that was submitted. With that, I agree with most of the, with all of the information that the hearing officer did send back. Those are the comments that I have on that. I've also agreed with some of the other things that the colleagues have said. With that, I would like to read the resolution on Baldwin Investment Group. The resolution for Baldwin Investment Group appeal to the Medical Marijuana Commission. Whereas in 2018, voters approved the City of Pontiac Medical Marijuana Facility Ordinance 2357B, and whereas Ordinance 2357B gives the city clerk the responsibility to score and rank applicants for visiting centers using a 130-point scoring system and awarding permits to the 20 highest scoring applicants. And whereas the City of Pontiac adopted Ordinance 2363, an ordinance to include medical marijuana facility use in designated overlay districts, and whereas Ordinance 2363, Section 2.546, Medical Marijuana Provisioning Center, Section F, licensing states that no more than 5 provisioning centers shall be established in each of the medical marijuana overlay districts, including Cesar Chavez, Walton Boulevard, and C2 Downtown Overlay District. And whereas Ordinance 2363, no more than 5 provisioning centers shall be established in the C1, C3, and C4 zone properties combined outside the medical marijuana overlay district. And whereas the city clerk accepted provisioning centers application by overlay district and the non-overlay for a 21-day period, January 6th through the 27th, 2020. And whereas the city clerk ranked and scored provisioning centers by district using a 130-point scoring system. And whereas the city clerk informed Baldwin Investment Group, LLC, that their application for a provisioning center in the non-overlay had received a score of 113 out of 130 and ranking of 14 of 48 on August the 20th, 2021. Whereas Baldwin Investment Group, LLC, appealed the score and ranking to the city clerk since its application was denied because it was not ranked in the top 5 for the non-overlay. The city clerk appointed Royal Law, PLLC, to serve as the hearing officer. The hearing officer conducted a hearing on October the 29th, 2021. The hearing officer issued a recommendation to the city clerk. The city clerk adopted the hearing officer's recommendation. Based on the hearing officer's recommendation and other appeals in the non-overlay, Baldwin Investment Group, LLC ranking changed from 14 to 18 and remained not ranked in the top 5. Therefore, the city clerk affirmed his decision to deny Baldwin Investment Group, LLC application. And whereas Ordinance 2357B allows an applicant to further appeal to the Medical Marijuana Commission. And whereas Baldwin Investment Group, LLC submitted an appeal to the Medical Marijuana Commission on December the 29th, 2021. Whereas on April the 27th, 2022, Counsel for Baldwin Investment Group sent correspondence to the city acknowledging that the background information, insurance scoring, 1-point possibility of Baldwin's Investment Group, LLC, was inconsistent with other applicants' scoring. And whereas the city attorney reviewed the files of other applicants, Lauren Investment, LLC, PGSH Holding, LLC, VB Chastening, Pontiac Provisioning, LLC, and Lake Effect, all submitted substantially similar documents regarding insurance coverage. However, they were awarded 0 points, while Baldwin Investment Group, LLC, was awarded 1 point for the substantially similar submissions. And whereas the city attorney issued a recommendation to the Medical Marijuana Commission that the clerk's decision to accept the hearing officer's recommendation to award 1 point for the insurance submission was inconsistent with the points awarded to Lauren Investment LLC, PGSH Holding LLC, VB Chastening, Pontiac Provisioning LLC, and Lake Effect for substantially similar submissions. As a result, the city attorney found the determination of the city clerk to be arbitrary and capricious. Therefore, the city attorney recommends that the commission deny the appeal in parts as it relates to facility planning, parent education, land use, and community impact, and grant this appeal in parts as it relates to background information insurance. And whereas the Medical Marijuana Commission reviewed Baldwin's Investment Group, LLC application appeal and the city's attorney's recommendation. Now, therefore, be it resolved, the Medical Marijuana Commission find no basis to overturn the clerk's decision to deny Baldwin's Investment Group, LLC application for a provisioning center in the non-overlay appeal in parts as it relates to facility planning, patient education, land use, and community impact, and grant Baldwin Investment Group, LLC appeal in part as it relates to background information insurance, and recommend and direct the clerk reduce the score for background information from 1.5 to 0.5, removing the 1 point for background information on insurance. A motion to take action.
Motion to take action.
I second that.
Roll call.
Wilson,
Yes.
Maley,
Yes.
Parath.
Yes.
3 yeas, no nays.
The resolution for Baldwin Investment Group appeal has been adopted. Next item on the agenda is item number 11, discussion on Lauren Investment LLC's appeal.
Okay.
Discussion on Lauren.
Yeah, I'm going over my notes here. One of the things I have seen, Section 8, C25 marijuana regulations, the applicant must provide proof of premises liability and casualty insurance. Commissioner Maley brought that up before. We seem to sometimes have some issues with that, but the point being is that, for example, Laren Investments did not provide proof. They say they intend to comply, but that's not proof of insurance required. And that was the main one. There are a couple other ones here, but they did get a bump up in the score from 121 to 125. So I'll leave my comment at that on Lauren Investments. You want to go?
I can pick it up. So yes, Lauren Investment Group is appealing two items, the marijuana regulations, insurance requirement, and again, yes, the stipulation for both supplying at least a letter of intent that says you will cover general liability and bodily injury with specified minimum levels for both were clear, and those were not provided by Lauren. So I would leave that score as 0.5 of 1.5 available. Facility planning, The appellant argues that, a licensed surveyor, is not needed to sign and seal their building diagram. Again, the application is clear on that requirement, stating on section 8C 18, or beg your pardon, 8C 19 for the scale diagram, that the applicant must submit a scale diagram illustrating the property upon which the proposed medical marijuana facility is to be operated, including all available parking spaces and specifying which parking spaces are handicap accessible. The next paragraph in that same section says such scale diagram must be in the form of a property survey prepared by a licensed professional surveyor. This commissioner can't argue the merits of a PE versus an LPS, but there were several applicants that I have reviewed that have come before me that did meet that specification with a surveyor. So I would agree that that category is somewhat deficient, and the score of 4 of 8 is apparent and appropriate.
There and again, in my review, I noticed that on August the 20th, Lauren did receive a score of 121 out of 130. And after the hearing officer's review, that score was modified by a total of 4 points. There and again, I happened to notice under facility planning, as was stated by the other 2 commissioners, that under facility planning, there and again, it's spelled out quite explicitly on the pages 14 of 31. And I pretty much agree with the score that was given 4 out of 8 points for that, because of the fact that it was spelled out. Do happen to notice that the hearing officer took in consideration that the city clerk took in consideration the score to modify the points from 111 to 125. City clerk did take those things in consideration. The other items have already been discussed. Same thing that I saw on those. So I would like to read the resolution, which is item number 12 on our agenda. The resolution for Lauren Investment. Resolution on Lauren Investment LLC appeal to the Medical Marijuana Commission. Whereas in 2018, voters approved the City of Pontiac Medical Marijuana Facility Ordinance, which is Ordinance 2357B, and whereas Ordinance 2357B gives the city clerk the responsibility to score and rank applications for provisioning centers using a 130-point scoring system and awarding permits to the 20 highest scoring applicants. And whereas the City of Pontiac adopted Ordinance 2363, an ordinance to include medical marijuana facility use in designated overlay districts. And whereas Ordinance 2363, Section 2.546, Medical Marijuana Provisioning Center, Sections F, licensing states that no more than 5 provisioning centers shall be established in each of the medical marijuana overlay districts, including Cesar Chavez, Walton Boulevard, and C2 Downtown Overlay District. And whereas Ordinance 2363, no more than 5 provisioning centers shall be established in the C1, C3, and C4 zone properties combined outside of the medical marijuana overlay district. And whereas the city clerk accepted provisioning center applications by overlay district and the non-overlay for a 21-day period of January 6th through the 27th, 2020. And whereas the city clerk ranked and scored provisioning centers by districts using a 130-point scoring system. And whereas the city clerk informed Lauren Investment LLC that their application for a provisioning center in the non-overlay had received a score of 121 of 130 and a ranking of 8 of 48 on August the 20th, 2021. Whereas Lauren Investment appealed the score and ranking to the city clerk since its application was denied because it was not ranked in the top 5 for the non-overlay. The city clerk appointed Grawell Law PLLC to serve as the hearing officer. The hearing officer conducted a hearing on October the 28th, 2021. The hearing officer issued a recommendation to the city clerk. The city clerk adopted the hearing officer's recommendation. Based on the hearing officer's recommendation and other appeals in the non-overlay, Lauren Investment LLC ranking changed from 8 to 6 and remained not ranked in the top 5. Therefore, the city clerk affirmed his decision to deny Lauren Investment LLC application. And whereas Ordinance 2357B allows an applicant to further appeal to the Medical Marijuana Commission, and whereas the city attorney issued a recommendation to the Medical Marijuana Commission to deny Lauren LLC appeal, and whereas the Medical Marijuana Commission reviewed Lauren's Investment LLC appeal and the city attorney's recommendation. Now, therefore, be it resolved, the Medical Marijuana Commission finds no basis to overturn the city's clerk decision to deny Lauren Investment LLC application for a provisioning center in non-overlay. Request permission to take action on the resolution.
Motion to take action.
I second that.
It's been moved and properly second to take action on the resolution. Roll call.
Wilson,
Yes.
Maley,
Yes.
Pratt.
Yes.
3 yeas, no nays.
Resolution adopted. The next item on the agenda is discussion on PGSH Holding. PGSH Holding.
You want to go?
Okay, PGSH Holdings LLC is, that's on the Cesar Chavez District CC-117 for 1054 Durant Avenue. They are appealing the marijuana regulations insurance sub-requirement with a score of 0-1. We've discussed this a lot and have run into it a lot as well. The applicant still specifically only lists the general coverage and no bodily injury limits, or excuse me, no bodily injury coverage or limits for that. So we have to mark that as somewhat deficient, or actually that one's just deficient because it's only 1 point. So the one of 0 points just is upheld. They are also appealing a background information, a security subsection of 0.5 out of 1.5 score. I don't have any contest for that. Under facility planning, the appellant they plainly state that some documents were submitted with this application included for the wrong parcel for Woodward Avenue. drawings, that is. That alone is going to warrant some deficient, a somewhat deficient score at best. Despite that, the appellant is arguing that they should be allowed to disregard plainly written requirements in the application that are clearly stating that 2 drawings are needed to be provided, that are prepared and provided and sealed by a licensed professional surveyor, and those would be the scale diagram of the property for Section 8C 19, showing the property, the building, any available parking and handicap parking, and then under the location map for Section 8C 27. Again, that requires that a location map identifying the property, relative locations and so forth. That one, I believe, may have been actually sealed by a surveyor. But again, initially it wasn't provided. Also being appealed was resident safety, a score of 5 of 10. The appellant states that the score 5 of 10 appears to be entirely arbitrary, given the hearing officer's acknowledgement that the appellant properly submitted material and that the material was not properly considered. However, this commissioner notes that the hearing officer actually said, that material was there, and while short on details, appellant has provided at least some of the information. Regardless of all of this, I've tried to go through it, and it is somewhat murky for me, I have to admit. In reviewing the section and what was provided in the application, and then using the scoring criteria and the checklists for the application that were provided, I reviewed it and reviewed this section, and for resident safety I can find 4 requirements. Detriment: does the building or operation pose a detriment for resident safety? Is there a system for communicating potential safety threats? A plan for securing facility, including surveillance? And are there any agreements with law enforcement or a private security company? The application doesn't really have any reference to an agreement with a security firm, though it mentions that local ordinance will allow law enforcement to access the site's security cameras and footage, and also that upon developing the site, they would help educate the local law enforcement by providing them with a crime prevention through environmental design plan. That was new. But in any event, I could not find any, again, a letter of intent with any kind of security firm that said that, were the applicant successful, they would be willing to provide the security once they were up and running.
I'd like to add something Commissioner Maley said about the facility planning too. The hearing officer stated that they think this section is riddled with inconsistency. Like Commissioner Maley said about the addresses, they showed 2 addresses, 1054 Durant and 1056 Durant, and quote, patients and caregivers will enter the facility by way of a door that faces northbound along Woodward Avenue, the main thoroughfare abutting the property. A review of the 1054, 1056 Durant addresses indicates these parcels do not abut Woodward Avenue. Hearing officer also shows the appellant's floor plan depicts a vertically integrated facility with a grower, processor, and provisioning center operating in the same co-located facility. But in its facility layout section of the application, appellant has indicated the following, quote, and I quote, although different types of marijuana facilities, namely processors, growers, and safety compliance testing facilities, generally maintain a significant amount of equipment, standalone provisioning centers such as the one submitted as part of this application do not involve the use of similar manufacturing equipment, which is obviously to me contradictory and to the hearing officer. So I just wanted to add that, because they got just a score of 1 out of 8 points on that, and I agree with that.
Just to add a few other things to what has already been said. I also noticed some of the same similarities that they noticed, but I did also notice that we couldn't tell whether or not it was a new structure or whether it was a gut job, because they had said they were going to gut the building that was faced on Durant at 1054. They was going to gut that building in there. So when you look at the two, it talked about them gutting out a building that was at 1054 Durant Avenue, but it clearly stated also in the facility planning that you would enter through the north on Woodward Avenue, as one of the commissioners have already stated. So there was some inconsistency, a lot of inconsistency on the facility planning. Under the background information, it did not contain an accurate description to meet the requirements, especially in the administration package that was issued. Under security requirements, there was administration package 333.235, which was spelled out the type security equipment and all of the security issues that needed to have been addressed. It didn't fully address all of those items that were spelled out in the security package in that document 333.235. Under facility plannings, as I've stated many times before, if you look at page 12 and 13 of page 21, it clearly spells out what needs to be done. And so does page 14 of 31 under facility planning. So therein, with all of the consistency that I saw in there, I pretty much agree with what was said. Most of the information that was described, I could not find some of the parts that were submitted under some of the sections that was called out. I do happen to notice that at the beginning, they started out with 101 points. PGSH Holdings started out with 101 points. After the hearing officer did look into his package and did an evaluation on it, they did pick up additional points. And it was recommended to the city clerk that he change that scoring to 114 out of 130 points, which is what was done. So they did pick up a plus additional 13 points in some other areas. But I can tell you in facility plannings and under security information, that was quite flawed in there from what I noticed. So I did agree with the recommendation that was made by the hearing officer. With that, I would like to read the resolution that we have for, I would like to read the resolution for PGSH that we have. And the resolution for PGSH. Whereas in 2018, voters approved the City of Pontiac Medical Marijuana Facility Ordinance, which is Ordinance 2357B. And whereas Ordinance 2357B gives the city clerk the responsibility to rescore and rank applications for provisioning centers using a 130-point scoring system and awarding permits to the 20 highest scoring applicants. And whereas the City of Pontiac adopted Ordinance 2363, an ordinance to include medical marijuana facility use in designated overlay districts. And whereas Ordinance 2363, Section 2.546, medical marijuana provisioning centers, Section F, licensing states that no more than 5 provisioning centers shall be established in each of the medical marijuana overlay districts, including Cesar Chavez, Walton Boulevard, and C2 Downtown Overlay District. And whereas Ordinance 2363, no more than 5 provisioning centers shall be established in the C1, C3, and C4 zone properties combined outside the medical marijuana overlay district. And whereas the city clerk accepted provisioning centers application by overlay district and non-overlay for a 21-day period of January 6th through the 27th, 2020. And whereas the city clerk ranked the score provisioning center by district using a 130-point scoring system. And whereas the city clerk informed PGSH Holding, LLC, that the application for a provisioning center in the Cesar Chavez District had received a score of 101 of 130 and a ranking of 117 on March the 2nd, 2021. Whereas PGSH Holding, LLC, appealed the score and ranking to the city clerk since its application was denied because it was not ranked in the top 5 for the Cesar Chavez District. The city clerk appointed Grohl Law P. LLC to serve as the hearing officer. The hearing officer conducted a hearing on April the 26th, 2021. The hearing officer issued a recommendation to the city clerk to award an additional 13 points, but affirmed its decision to deny PGH Holding LLC application for failure to submit a complete application due to PGSH Holding LLC's failure to include a floor plan with its application. Given the inconsistency and contradictory created by PGSH Holding LLC in its application, appellant's application failed to give the city clerk the ability to verify where applicants even seek to operate its facility or what the facility would even look like. This rendering much of the remaining portion of the applicant's application similar deficient because they are prephased and because they are prephased on company assumptions of various appellant facilities will be located and what the facility will look like. As a result of the hearing officer's conclusion, the city clerk's decision to deny PGSH Holding LLC's application was appropriate under these circumstances and was not arbitrary or capricious. The city clerk adopted the hearing officer's recommendation and affirmed its decision to deny PGSH Holding LLC application. And whereas Ordinance 2357B allows an applicant to further appeal to the Medical Marijuana Commission. And whereas PGSH Holding LLC submitted an appeal to the Medical Marijuana Commission on June 21st, 2021. And whereas the city's attorney issued a recommendation to the Medical Marijuana Commission to deny PGSH Holding LLC's appeal. And whereas the Medical Marijuana Commission reviewed PGSH Holding LLC appeal and the city attorney's recommendation. Now, therefore, be it resolved, the Medical Marijuana Commission find no basis to overturn the city clerk's decision to deny PGSH Holding LLC applicant for a provisioning center in Cesar Chavez District. A motion to act on the resolution.
Motion to take action.
I second that.
It's been properly moved and seconded to take action. Roll call.
Maley,
Yes.
Pratt,
Yes.
Wilson.
Yes.
3 yeas, no nays.
Next item on the agenda is I'm sorry. The resolution for the PGSH Holding LLC appeal has been adopted. Discussion on Pontiac Provisioning LLC's appeal. Pontiac's Provisioning.
Pontiac Provisioning LLC is applied for the downtown district, 140 North Saginaw, under a DT-118 application. Tonight they are appealing the insurance requirements with a -1 score on that, or that lack of one, a 0 of 1. The planning and facility score of 4 of 8, and a resident safety of 5 of 10. Having reviewed the Commissioner appeal and the Pontiac Provisioning's original application, using the original application scoring criteria and its checklist provided to the applicant prior to submission, I have found the following. For the insurance section, Section 8.c.25, Paragraph 2 of the application guide specifically lists that both bodily injury, casualty insurance, and commercial general liability must be listed with specific minimum coverage limits. Pure Provisioning provided a letter from Benchmark Financial Limited, which only listed general liability with no mention of bodily casualty insurance or the limits of any coverage for such. Therefore, this section is deficient, as 50% of the required coverage was not apparent, and that would equate to a very deficient. I agree that the applicant was judged fairly in this section. For facility planning, I see that the appellant did provide a sealed or signed and sealed land survey, but the building detail drawing, as was specified in application 8C19, paragraph 2, it was also by a PE, and while I may sympathize with the appellant's argument that a PE and an LPS, again, may be very similar, the instructions are quite clear, and we are bound by just following the instructions. I agree that the section was somewhat deficient in that both documents were not signed and sealed by licensed professional surveyors. Under land use and resident safety, though some of the required information was required under these, for the resident safety portion, I could not locate or find, again, an agreement for a security company within this application. And I, again, was looking for a letter of intent from any security company to agree to surveil and provide on-site security for this establishment in the event that they were granted a license and their business was up and running. So again, I agree that this category is somewhat deficient. That's all I have.
Okay. It wasn't one of the bigger bump ups for the final score on this. They did point out again that under the insurance, and there is, I saw some, but there needs to be proof that you're going to have insurance on this. Okay, not just a letter of intent saying, yeah, we're going to get insurance. There's got to be some kind of at least something saying, yes, we're ABC Insurance Company and we will, provide insurance. There's nothing like that in that. And again, the surveyor, licensed surveyor, I know we've heard some talk about that too, but the point is it says it. And there are other applicants who met these requirements. So it may be somewhere further down in there, but it does say it. And even if your plan was done by a architect or engineer, that sort of thing, that is not a licensed surveyor, and you could have just gotten the licensed surveyor plan and threw it in on top of your engineering plan. That would have sufficed too, but that didn't happen. So I'm agreeing, with the score getting bumped from 100 to 111, but still wasn't enough, and that's what I have to say.
With that, I would like to read the resolution for Pontiac Provisioning LLC. The resolution on Pontiac Provisioning LLC appeal to the Medical Marijuana Commission. Whereas in 2018, voters approved the City of Pontiac Medical Marijuana Facility Ordinance, which is Ordinance 2357B. And whereas Ordinance 2357B gives the city clerk the responsibility to score and rank applicants for provisioning centers using a 130-point scoring system and awarding permits to the 20 highest scoring applicants. And whereas the City of Pontiac adopted Ordinance 2363, an ordinance to include medical marijuana facility use in designated overlay districts. Whereas Ordinance 2363, Section 2.546, Medical Marijuana Provisioning Center, Section F, licensing states that no more than 5 provisioning centers shall be established in each of the medical marijuana overlay districts, including Cesar Chavez, Walton Boulevard, and C2 downtown overlay districts. Whereas the city clerk accepted provisioning center application by overlay district and the non-overlay for a 21-day period of January 6th through the 27th, 2020. And whereas the city clerk ranked and scored provisioning center by district using a 130-point scoring system. And whereas the city clerk informed Pontiac Provisioning LLC that their application for a provisioning center in downtown overlay district had received the score of 106 of 130 and a ranking of 10 of 23 on May the 18th, 2021. Whereas Pontiac Provisioning LLC appealed the score and ranking to the city clerk since its application was denied because it was not ranked in the top 5 for the downtown overlay district. The city clerk appointed Royal Law P LLC to serve as the hearing officer. The hearing officer conducted a hearing on July the 16th, 2021. The hearing officer issued a recommendation to the city clerk. The city clerk adopted the hearing officer's recommendation. Based on the hearing officer's recommendation and other appeals, the downtown overlay district Pontiac Provisioning LLC ranking changed from 10 to 9 and remained not ranked in the top 5. Therefore, the city clerk affirmed his decision to deny Pontiac Provisioning LLC application. And whereas Ordinance 2357B allows an applicant to further appeal to the Medical Marijuana Commission, and whereas Pontiac Provisioning LLC submitted an appeal to the Medical Marijuana Commission on September the 10th, 2021, and whereas the city attorney issued a recommendation to the Medical Marijuana Commission of Pontiac Provisioning LLC's appeal, and whereas the Medical Marijuana Commission reviewed Pontiac Provision LLC's appeal and the city's attorney recommendation. Now therefore be it resolved, the Medical Marijuana Commission find no basis to overturn the clerk's decision to deny Pontiac's Provision LLC's application for a provisioning center in the downtown overlay district. A motion to act on the resolution.
Motion to take action.
I second it.
It's been moved and properly second to take action on the resolution. Roll call.
Pratt,
Yes.
Wilson,
Yes.
Maley.
Yes.
3 yeas, no nays.
The resolution for Pontiac Provisioning LLC's appeal is adopted. If there are any public comments, you have a 3-minute limit and you're welcome to use the podium. If there's anyone in the public that would like to make a comment, you have 3 minutes for your comments. You're welcome to use the mic at the podium.
Good evening. My name is Frank DeLuca. I represent Jars Holding LLC. You earlier this evening reviewed my client's application and appeal that we filed on behalf of Jars. Our position, gentlemen, is simply that during the scoring process, the city applied requirements that were either not part of the ordinance or not part of its application, or simply, with respect to my client, missed information that was contained in their application that fulfilled the requirements of the ordinance and the application. During our initial appeal process, the law firm that was appointed to review my client's application found in 3 separate instances that the initial review by the city to be arbitrary and capricious, which led to an increase of 11 points. For instance, in the areas of facility planning, land use, and community impact, the hearing officer specifically in his ruling said that these reviews by the city clerk were, quote, arbitrary and capricious, and therefore reevaluated these sections. Unfortunately, we believe that the hearing officer declined to increase our scoring in other categories, for instance, in the philanthropic and community improvement and community development sections, where we believe that the application met or exceeded the requirements. At the end of the day, it's our position that it's almost impossible to have 3 specific instances where your appointed hearing officer found the process to be arbitrary and capricious and not find that the entire evaluation of my client's application to be arbitrary and capricious. Based on that, we submit that JAR's application needs to be completely reevaluated. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? You have 3 minutes. Anyone else?
Thank you, and good evening. My name is Mike Bahura. I represent Baldwin Investments and a couple of the other applications, Pontiac Provisioning and PGSH. You know, this ordinance was passed back in 2018, so we're almost at 4 years through this process. And, you know, after several hundreds of thousands of dollars spent on these applications, in our first round of appeals, we at least were able to get the hearing officer to review them, add some points in many cases. But so far, what I've noticed out of this commission, respectfully, is that you are basically rubber stamping whatever the hearing officers, the last appeal decision was. As a matter of fact, the resolutions are pre-printed and in the agenda on the website, and you're reading them verbatim. So are we to assume that there is discussion happening beforehand? I mean, the resolution for denial for every single one of these is already pre-printed, and you're just reading them out loud. The hearing officer found dozens of instances that you guys have read out loud where there was mistakes made. So you're telling me that all these second appeals, not you guys couldn't find one instance where you're going to overturn that decision? You're just going to keep rubber stamping them? And I realize you guys got thrown in at the last minute, but we've had a change of commissioners already. We've had commissioners that don't show up, and we're supposed to just sit here and listen to you read something that's been printed from weeks ago and rubber stamp it. Now, mine are done, but you have some more tomorrow. I'm hoping that one of you will have the courage to actually overturn one of them, because mistakes were made. It's clear. I showed you proof of 2 exact documents where one person got the point and the other one didn't. And instead of saying, okay, maybe we should have got that point, you guys took the point away. I can't recall any other appeal hearing where you lose points or you go backwards. But somehow, Pontiac has found a way to do that.
Anyone else? Hearing none, a motion for adjournment is in order.
Motion to adjourn.
It's been moved and properly second for an adjournment.
Hold on. Wilson,
Roll call.
Wilson,
Yes.
Maley. Yes. Pratt.
Yes.
3 yeas, no nays. So adjourned at 7:40.
We're adjourned at 7:42.